One of the first things you mentioned early was your parents being divorced. Do you feel like that has affected you in any way?
Oh, 100%. Two different households, two different families. It definitely had a huge impact on me and a lot of negative side effects that I wasn't even aware of. And I think one of the big ones for me probably was just not realizing how much it made me go in my own shell. In March of 2022, everything changed. I blew up my whole life. I quit my job. I had gone through a divorce. It was very traumatic from financially, emotionally, psychologically, romantically. And I moved from Denver to Brooklyn, all within the span of like 4 months. And I was just in need of deeper meaning. And so I decided to ultimately invest in different training programs.
That's quite a journey. You're going through a divorce post pandemic, then leading all the way to life coaching.
That's been the positive thing that's come out of it, that it's this chance to be reborn. And I truly believe that getting coached is a privilege, but an investment in yourself. It's like this cheat code to get.
Okay, so we're at it again. Today's conversation is with a very special guest. It's with a good friend of mine that I've come to grow close to over the last, I think it's what, 5 years. He's a fellow content creator, he's a communications coach, and we've actually been working alongside each other for the last year, I believe. And I'm stoked to just have this conversation with him. I'm happy he agreed. His name is Rico Lazo. And so I want to welcome Rico to the podcast. It's finally happening, Rico. What's going through your mind right now?
I'm sitting here in awe and also just with a lot of pride in seeing what you're doing, Andy. So I'm very happy to come on to your show and share some insights and looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, yeah. So, the podcast is all about your journey. It's not necessarily centered around a specific topic, although we might zoom into some parts. But me and you, our story goes back to 2018, I believe. I we met when you moved to Amsterdam to work, and then I think a year later we ended up working together. You introduced me to a very cool company. So I'm just curious to know, where all have you lived so far, and what has those experiences been like?
Wow, 5 years already, Andy. Just you have me thinking back to 2018, and I think, or is it 6 years now? I can't even do math.
Oh, so yeah, 6 years. Yeah, 5 years. Yeah, five going on six.
No, it'll be six this month.
Is it
We met
six?
in June of 2018. Now that I think about it, so
Yeah.
yeah, right,
Oh yeah,
19.
we're 2024. My gosh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 6 years. My math is off.
The reason I bring that up, and I'll answer your question, is that if somebody said in that bank, the two of you are going to be doing a podcast episode together, I would have been like, "Get out of here, man! What are you talking about? What are you smoking? I know I'm in Amsterdam, but what are you smoking? You know?" Um, no, but so to answer your question, I've had the good fortune. I would say it's probably been the best part of my life, just having the privilege to live in many different places. I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in Colorado, in southern Colorado, and really, I guess my parents are divorced. My dad lived in Denver. I grew up in Pueblo. And so I spent a lot of time on the road shuffling or shuttling back and forth between my mom's and my dad's. And my dad, really inspired me to travel. But before that, my mom, she moved us to San Jose, California, my freshman year of high school, which is an eye-opening experience. And from there, when I was in college, I did two different study abroads. So one was in Mexico, one was in Puerto Rico, and that's really where the travel bug hit me, and I just wanted to continue traveling. After graduating from college, I spent 6 months in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Then I moved back to the States. I lived in Mexico again. Then I moved to Colombia, back to the States, to Amsterdam, back to the States, to Colombia again. Now I'm finally back in the United States, but we'll see how long that lasts. So mostly Latin America, but I did do that year stint in Amsterdam.
And moving around in those different places, what insights and experiences that you've had abroad that has always that lives with you right now, that remains part of you?
There's so many, but to share a couple of insights, I think that nothing teaches you about life the way that living abroad does. Because especially when you're living in a country where it's a different language, right? If you're living in another, if I were to move to the UK or Canada, it would certainly be an interesting experience, but less of a sort of foreign or unique experience, perhaps. But I think it just teaches you a lot about how to communicate, how to live life with different um, you know ways of living, whether that's how you how you eat, the activities you can do, the lifestyle, the weather, and how that influences cultures. And so just it's like life's best teacher is travel, but I think living abroad versus just traveling is the true um, great teacher. Is just living abroad, nothing like it. And I think it really helps you understand how the world works. I think one of the biggest problems for many people is if they've never traveled abroad or never lived abroad. I don't think they even think about this, but I think their understanding of how the world works or how people live is somewhat limited in their knowledge of how people actually live. So I think it's just very important to get out and travel. Not everybody needs to live abroad or do what I do, which is pack up and start over all the time. But it's been just the greatest teacher for me, for sure.
I can imagine. And I want to just reverse back a bit where, one of the first things you mentioned early was your parents being divorced. Now, I mean, I've had the, I guess, fortune of my parents being together, but do you feel like that has affected you in any way?
Oh, 100%. I think that there's this debate of nature versus nurture, nature being, genetically, how you are and what you're predisposed to. But I think nurture has a big impact. And when your parents are divorced, that automatically means you have two different households. And you can imagine that no two households are alike. My mother was much stricter and really focused on education. My dad was much more laissez faire, kind of let us do whatever, a lot less structure. But my dad was less, what's the word? Like loving in a feel good way. We connected on different ways, but my mom was a very doting and generous person with her time and energy. And my dad, he's like a poet and a musician and artist. And he always was doing these cool artistic things. But I think in terms of parenthood or fatherhood, I think there were some things that he probably just didn't really even realize he was maybe not embracing. And so it definitely impacted me. My mom growing up was like my everything. And my dad, in many ways, I kind of looking back on it now, was more of a friend than a father figure, And I think I really probably needed a stronger father figure in my life. My mom did remarry, and so I grew up with a stepdad, but that's always a little bit different than just having your own two biological parents in the house. But without a doubt, it impacted me, I think. And I think there was actually a lot of unresolved trauma that I never even realized that I was
Mm.
carrying with me through all these years until much, much later that I was able to really do some deep personal work and understand more about who I am, why I am the way that I am. And I think just understanding how divorce can impact you as an adult is a really important thing for people who've been brought up in a household where there's two different families, child of divorce, whatever you want to call it. But it definitely had a huge impact on me and a lot of negative side effects, a lot of negative things I think that I wasn't even aware of. And I think one of the big ones for me probably was just not realizing how much it kind of made me go in my own shell. Like I kind of like a turtle with his head in the shell. I think I kind of what's what I'm looking for here. I think I kind of withdrew from certain things because of the trauma that I experienced from the divorce, and not that it was like a physically abusive kind of thing at all. It was just more seeing the arguing, seeing the fighting between my parents, and just being stuck between two different households. I think it had a big impact on me for sure.
Man, I can only imagine like how that must have impacted you. I mean, even though like my parents are together, I'm not gonna say it was all, how do you say, flowers and rainbows. Have you ever? I'm just curious. Like, again, this is just a casual conversation. So, have you ever spoken to your father about that period?
I sort of maybe think of the old expression "let sleeping dogs lie." I don't
Yeah.
know. As I've gotten older, I sort of really subscribe to this belief that going back into your childhood and trying to understand a lot of traumas, I think it can help some people, but I think it can also cause more harm than good at times. And I think maybe for doing personal work, it can be helpful. But for me, with my relationship with my father, I think it's better just to not necessarily go back and ask a lot of those things. And as I mentioned earlier, my dad's not really a very lovey emotion kind of, share his emotions kind of guy. He's brash. He's maybe a bit cocky at times, just a bit aggressive in certain ways. I mean, just to give you a picture. This happened recently. My father and I went to a poetry reading in Boulder, Colorado, which is a university city where I went, my alma mater. And I was driving, he was in the passenger seat, and I pulled over on a one-way street, and there was a guy behind us who just started to lay on the horn and honk and just like, wanted me to go. But like I wasn't blocking traffic. I could literally I got over enough that he could have gone around me because I was waiting for a car to pull out so I could pull in and park. But this guy just laid on his horn, so I'm like waving him on with my arm, and it was just apparent he wasn't going to. So I ended up just foregoing the parking spot and parked. My dad started walking to the poetry reading. Well, this guy comes walking around the corner, and my dad whispers to me, he's like, "I wonder if that's the guy, uh, who was laying on the horn." I'm like, "Ah, Dad, don't worry about it. Let's just go. It's just not even right." I'm like, not even looking for any conflict. I'm like, even if it was him, I'm like, what's it gonna do? My dad's like, "No, no, I think that was him." It's my dad. He's like, "Were you the guy laying on the horn back there?" He's like, "What if I was?" And those were like fighting words to my dad. So my dad and this guy got into it, right? Verbally, hurling verbal, insults
Slangs.
to one another. And I thought we were literally going to go to blows. And here I am. I'm like, not trying to go there. I'm like, Dad, let's just go. Let's just go. So you can imagine with your friends, the one who's kind of like quick to pop off and quick to get into stuff. So that's my dad. My dad is very much, the one who's not going to take anything from anybody. And I'm much more peace and love. I would have been a hippie back in the days. I'm just like, let's just not even worry about it. So
Yeah.
and I wonder if perhaps if I were raised with him in my household, if I maybe would have been a bit more assertive, a bit more aggressive, not overly aggressive, but in times maybe where you need to be to stand up for yourself or to not take stuff from people, right? To just say, hey, you know what? That's not cool, man. Because I wasn't gonna say anything, but my dad was like, no, 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 I gotta let this guy know what he was doing wasn't okay.
Yeah. That's I had to laugh early on because as I hear you as I hear you describe your father, it kind of made me just think of my father because he's also this he's a very social guy. He's a very, outgoing guy, but he can also be very brash and sometimes emotionless. And I've never really spoken about this out in the open, but it's like this is the Body of Work podcast. So we're trying to do things a bit differently. And now on the topic of dad and I guess just like being a man, what would you say are things you would do differently um, than what your father did?
That's a great question. I don't have children, so we'll see if that comes to pass. In terms of his parenting style, he was very hands off, and he played baseball growing up. That was always his favorite sport. So when I told him that I wanted to swim in high school instead of play baseball, he wasn't really too hip to that game. He was like, "Look, I'll pay for your baseball team. I'll pay for your equipment. Just go out for the baseball team," rather than embracing my interest
Mm.
in swimming. I had this wonderful swim coach in high school who was more than a coach. He was a father figure to me in a time when I really needed that. So I think, to answer your question, I would support my child wholeheartedly, regardless of whatever his or her interests were, whatever type of person they're becoming or growing into. I would just embrace that. I think we each have our own unique gifts. And I think, and sometimes I don't know how much my dad necessarily encouraged me or embraced the person that I was. I think there was a lot of criticism for things that he wasn't necessarily okay with the way my mom raised me. And so I think if I were to have my own child and use some of the lessons I've learned through life, it would be very different than how I was raised by my dad, for sure.
Yeah, I feel that. I completely feel that because I mean, as you know, I'm a father of two, and a lot of the ways that I'm bringing up my kids, not to say that my father was a bad dad. I'm not saying that. But there are some things that I felt I would have appreciated, growing up, the same thing like you. And so I make a conscious decision intentionally to be different in some slash most ways. So yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, okay, so that was the topic of fathers. Now you spoke about traveling and how traveling, some of the insights or what it has taught you is how to deal with people, how communication is a very important factor where that is concerned. And now I know you're a man of language. You love languages, which is no surprise why you're into, in the communications realm. Um, but where did that love for language and communication come from?
From both of my parents, in some ways. My father's of Mexican descent, so his father was born in Mexico, grew up speaking Spanish. But my father was raised in a time in the US when it was common to not teach your children a foreign language for fear of your child being chastised or punished in school for speaking the language. So my dad didn't actually grow up speaking Spanish in the household. He learned Spanish when he studied in Mexico when he was 20 in 1970. But because his parents spoke Spanish and I was around them as a child, I was fascinated by the Spanish language. I would hear them speaking and try to just make sense of what they were saying. Of course, didn't know, but my grandmother was an amazing cook, so I knew all of the names of the food, and so I just got to know Spanish through my grandparents in some way. And then on my mom's side, my mom has a love for language as well. She speaks Spanish fairly well. She grew up speaking, well, not speaking in school, and she didn't grow up speaking, but in school from kindergarten through her senior year in high school, she took French at a private girls' school in Chicago. So she's had a love for languages, and that definitely influenced me growing up as a kid. And so she always encouraged me to take Spanish in school or any language. I think I took a German like elective in second grade for probably a few weeks, and I remember learning how to count in German and things like that. And so both parents influenced me for languages. And then I think the other thing that really influenced me to learn languages was just the travel piece, right? And so my dad was in the military in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. And he came back with this scrapbook, which I don't know how common it is to do scrapbooks anymore. People just do online stuff on Instagram or Facebook, whatever. But he had this, and I still see it every time I go home. Like once a year, I'll flip through this scrapbook because it wasn't like a personal, like really like intimate scrapbook. It was postcards, pictures, ticket stubs of his time when he was stationed in Berlin, Germany, in the early 1980s. So during the height of the Cold War, when there was still
Mm.
East and West Germany, he had served in the U.S. Army. And seeing these postcards and these pictures and ticket stubs to concerts of David Bowie and all this like amazing stuff. It was just like, wow, like it let me know there was a bigger world. And my dad learned to speak conversational German from his time living in Germany, the 3 years that he was there. So hearing him speak in German and just, not that he spoke that much, but I knew enough. I knew that he spoke. So I would ask him to say things and he would always say things in German. And so from both parents, it just was a big influence on me to learn to speak more than just English.
Ah, nice, nice. Um, so I know also you recently, as you mentioned a while ago, you moved back to Denver, Colorado from Colombia. How was that experience for you in Colombia? Like, what were you doing there?
Yeah, I mean, so I moved to Colombia in December of 2022. So it's been over a year and a half now. And I decided to take a career sabbatical, right? And so I was really trying to find what I wanted to do with my career. I took a sabbatical not to do research like a professor might or to do a more formal education program, but I was just really burned out of working in the career fields that I was in. I first worked as an educator in a public school system. Then I moved into training, corporate training, which is where I met you, not met you, but which is where I ended up getting you a job at the company we worked together at for a short while. Um, and I think this notion of going to Colombia was just an opportunity for me to help better understand myself and to invest in myself. I mean, I had gone through a divorce. So I got divorced in March of 2022, and I was just in need of deeper meaning. You know, Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning,
Yeah.
and I think for me, I was on my own journey, right? From the pandemic of 2020, going through a divorce, I knew I needed something that gave me more meaning. I just wasn't finding it in work. And so I decided to ultimately invest in these different training programs. You know, during my 10 plus years of marriage, I think on some levels, I invested heavily in my partner's personal growth, helping her go back to school and really further her career. But I wasn't necessarily investing in myself. And I never even thought of like that I could invest in myself. You know, in the US, it's very common. You go to college, you get a job, you start working, and then you eventually work until you retire. But I think the smart people realize that you just continue investing in yourself. I mean, I've been a lifelong learner, but a lot of it's been like this self-study. And I think there's a real opportunity for people to gain skills and grow by investing in yourself. I truly believe that getting coached is a privilege, but an investment in yourself. It's like this cheat code to gain skills more quickly because by working with somebody who's further along in their journey or their level of expertise than you are is like the fast track to success. And so I went down to Colombia. I did a content creator program that was fantastic. I never had really done content creation, short form video. The irony is, I run a podcast with a buddy of mine. I'd been doing that for 3 plus years at that point, and or 2 plus years, I forget. And I didn't even consider myself to be a content creator. That term was still kind of somewhat new at that point, and learned how to do TikTok, reels and Instagram reels, and realized that wasn't totally what I wanted to do because I didn't have a focus. I didn't know how I was going to apply that knowledge. And interestingly enough, my brother and I took a road trip in Colombia. We were both like identical twins, both doing career sabbaticals at the same time, and we took a road trip and we were in Pereira, Colombia, which is near the coffee growing region. And one of the guests that we interviewed on my podcast was a life coach. And it was just like this series of encounters that I had. So, first, it was a content creation. So I learned how to make these videos. Then, on this podcast interview, interviewing this life coach made a big impact on me because she recommended this book called Designing Your Life. It's by these two retired professors from Stanford who were product designers. And the notion of the book is by using the principles of product design, which is iterative processes, right? Trying things, seeing what works, what doesn't work, a problem is actually a good thing to have because it makes you solve things, it makes you figure things out. So if you apply these principles to your life, you're then able to enrich your life and grow yourself in a way that actually allows you to live the life, to build your life, your dream life, whatever it is, but just to think about your life as a product that you can iterate and improve and constantly upgrade. And so that was an impactful thing. So much so that I decided to embark on a life coaching program. So I enrolled in the Jay Shetty certification school to learn how to become a life coach. And that's really where I learned sort of the art and craft of what it means to be a coach, how to be coached. And so I just continued to invest in myself. And that's what I was doing in Colombia, right? Just really trying to figure out where was I going to take my career. And by being in Colombia, it was a chance to get away from all of the noise, friends, family, just kind of go monk mode in a sense to just really focus in on my personal development.
That's that's quite a journey and quite a series of fortunate encounters that led from you going through a divorce post pandemic and then leading up to all the way to life coaching. um but what I want to go into a little bit more is because you mentioned you were married for 10 years. Now that's not nothing. And then to go through a divorce, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what that was like. But like, how was that for you? Like, how did that impact you?
Going through the divorce,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think marriage and divorce are just two things that are for a lot of people very important, and I think they are important. But I think for me, divorce really impacted me because once my ex-wife and I decided to formally, end our relationship via the divorce, I thought people were going to be much more communicative with me. I thought people were really going to reach out and say, "Hey, Rico, how's it going? And check in with you." And that wasn't really the case. And I don't want to blame my family or friends because I think maybe in some ways, maybe I was a bit standoffish. Maybe I wasn't asking for help. And so I think one of the big lessons that really came out of divorce was that I needed to live life in a different way. I think in some ways I was kind of the lone wolf and kind of did things independently, just really didn't ask for help, didn't lean on people, didn't really try to cultivate my interests and really embrace my passions in terms of getting involved in different communities. I mean, I had friends, of course, but they weren't necessarily friends that I did a lot of the things that I like to do in my free time, apart from hanging out, going to a concert or what have you. But um, I think the divorce impacted me both positively and negatively. I mean, negatively, emotionally, it was very tough. It was a sense, like you said, 10 years is not nothing. I mean, 10 years, it's like it's like almost like you did this, not saying a prison term, but like, you have this life that you've built up and then suddenly
Yeah.
that life is over. So whatever you had before, it's a whole new thing. And so it was very traumatic to go through that, you know, I mean, from financially, emotionally, psychologically, romantically, everything changed. Everything, my whole life, I blew up my whole life. I mean, I quit my job, I got divorced, and I moved from Denver to Brooklyn, all within the span of like 4 months. And so, we've talked a lot about Will Smith brick by brick building this wall of whatever you're working on. I blew up the previous wall. And so I've been in this process of rebuilding my life brick by brick, but that's been the positive thing that's come out of it, that it's this chance to be reborn, right? The phoenix rising, right? Got too close to the sun, melted, crashed to the earth. Now I'm rebuilding my life in the way that I want to do it. And that's, I think, been just the greatest opportunity to really be grateful for this second chance and to have this opportunity to be more aware of what it is that I want to do, my talents, my gifts, my shortcomings, and really working on being the best version of myself and living a more fulfilled and purpose-driven life has been the real positive thing that's come out of my divorce.
I mean, it's amazing that you went through that, and I mean, from the sounds of it, like you're just like you said, you're like a phoenix. You're rising above from that period. And I've read in the past, sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before, yeah, you can really you start rebuilding, like rebuilding in a way that really fits you, and doing the things that you want to do. Would you say Rico now is in a much better place than then, than before?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not to disparage my ex-wife in any way, but I think that when you look at your life and you can feel like you're not living to your true potential, or you're not fulfilled, and not that any one person fulfills you. It's a combination of things. It's a confluence of all these different factors. But I just knew in my heart of heart that I was not living the purpose I was meant to live out. And so, by blowing up my life, my former life, it was like the TNT detonator, and then
Yeah, boom.
explodes and ashes come up. And here comes Rico rising out of the ashes. And not to make light of the situation, but I don't know that I hit rock bottom. I think it was emotionally very draining. It was financially very difficult. It was just a lot of turmoil because, again, I quit my job to move on to a different opportunity. I moved from Denver to Brooklyn because I wanted to get away from everybody and everything. And I ended my relationship. So I was single, a single guy in his 40s in New York. And New York City in your 40s is very different than New York City in your 20s. I had lived in New York in my 20s for 8 years, and so my 20s and 30s, and so it was just a very different experience. It was fun visiting my old haunts and seeing old friends, but I realized that that was not the place for me either, and that's ultimately what led me to take my sabbatical in Colombia. But yeah, man, it was a very traumatic experience. But I think there's a lot of people, and this may be a message to people who are in relationships that are dead end relationships. And I'm not saying people should just get divorced because I got divorced, or get divorced because you're having some difficulties, but I think you need to be real with yourself. You need to ask yourself, is this really the relationship that I want for myself? Is this the life that I want? I think there's a lot of people who live their lives living this codependent existence because they're afraid to learn how to be autonomous and independent. And we come into this world independently, we exit the world independently, and I think you need to be able to embrace who you are. And that's something that it's taken me until recent to truly know who I am.
Yeah, so good, so good. And I mean, you have this unique opportunity, and you mentioned you lived, what was it, in Brooklyn in your 20s, and living now in your 40s is much different. And every time you still say 40s, I'm like, bro, I always forget that you're in your 40s because you look like you're in your 30s. You look younger than me even.
I don't know about that.
um
About smoke and mirrors.
no, 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 I'm telling you. And
Pills,
so I know
potions.
one.
Just kidding.
What was it?
Pills, potions, and hair dyes. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's just I guess I'm lucky. I don't know, man. It's been good. Life's been good to
Nah,
me.
you got good genes. You got good genes. And now I know, you spoke about investing in yourself. How important that is in terms of getting a coach, etc. But not but and I remember when because we had lost touch for a bit in that 6 year span, and when we did reconnect, if I'm not mistaken, you were doing this 75 hard program.
Mm.
And I don't want to assume, um but was that one of the things, that one of the bricks that you started laying to really rebuild that foundation of Rico?
Oh man, I think that the 75 hard challenge, without a doubt, is like the cornerstone the new foundation that I built. I've always really enjoyed fitness and athletics and sports, but I can't say I was super consistent in going to the gym or, I'd run in races. I did this indoor triathlon series when I lived in New York. I played tennis. I do a lot of different things, but the 75 hard challenge, what it really taught me was that through doing really hard work consistently, you can rapidly transform your life, like rapidly. I mean, 75 days sounds like a long time when you're going through that challenge, but now that I think about it, that was already, January 1st of 2023 to March 16th or 17th. I have to do the math. And so here we are more than a year later, right? And it just still has a huge impact on me. I still go to the gym almost every day, 6 days a week. And without a doubt, that helped me transform my belief around who I am and what I could accomplish. And I would recommend to anybody who's struggling for purpose to consider doing a physical challenge like the 75 hard. I don't think it has to be that one, but I learned from David Goggins that you need to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and doing hard stuff can get you out of your comfort zone pretty quickly.
And how important has that going through that challenge, that program, been for your confidence?
Oh man, I can't. It's hard to even quantify. I mean, this is coming from somebody who you know thinks just has really struggled with low self esteem, depression, social anxiety, lack of self belief. Uh, you can put a number of labels to it, but it really helped me transform my belief in self, to see the physical transformation that can happen so quickly allowed me to really help transform some of my own beliefs around my abilities and who I was, and what I could accomplish. And I think that we never truly know what people are going through, right? Because oftentimes you just assume people are doing well or they're okay. But I think it really allowed me to learn how to dig deep and to be stronger, to be more aggressive, to be more assertive, to be more, I don't want to say dominant or domineering, but to have more belief in my physical capabilities, and just overall my sense of self, just being a stronger person. So it was just foundational in my, rebuilding my life.
Sound body, sound mind, right?
Oh man, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, okay, so this last year, I think, or year and a half, you invested in yourself. So you did your 75 hard day challenge, and then you invested in a number of programs, life coaching, content creation. When you did the life coaching, I know there was also a journey there, from life coaching to communications coach, and then communications coach focusing on accent reduction. How important would you say it is to be flexible when rebuilding yourself?
I think it's essential. For me, going through that life coaching program, it sort of opened my eyes to the world of coaching. But as the program was coming to an end, I think a lot of the participants, myself included, were still clueless on who we could truly serve. I think a lot of people get into coaching because they enjoy the process of personal growth and how it helps you transform your life, your belief in self, your understanding of what you want to do with your life. And so people want to take that and then coach others, but they don't necessarily feel like they actually have the skills to do that yet, right? Because being a coach is one thing, being a businessman is another, and being able to marry those two to be effective in not only finding clients, charging them what you need to charge them to make a living doing it. It's not for the faint of heart at all.
Yeah.
And so I think you need to be flexible. I think you need to be open. And for me, because I wasn't confident as just being a life coach, a lot of people even look at life coaching like, what is that? They don't even truly know, even if you try to explain it to them. And that's why I continued to invest in myself. I mean, I was doing a career sabbatical. So for the first 9 months, I wasn't working at all. I was literally just dialed into just these programs and learning and just living off of savings. But eventually I started working again. I needed to make some money. And so I was teaching English online. And that's what really got me thinking about, oh, I could coach, not just teach people how to speak English, but people who are more advanced with their English skills to help them develop their overall communication skills. And that led me to more programs that I invested in. So I invested in this accent reduction program, which was an amazing experience because I felt like that was a true, like, super niche kind of thing. It was a very specific skill set. And I'm very grateful that I went through that program. And then as I was finishing that program, or actually, I started another program around the same time, this public speaking academy. So I literally was just stacking these programs one on top of the other. It was just this opportunity to stack skills. And that's really what's allowed me, I think, to really bloom and flourish as a communication coach because I'm doing pronunciation coaching, I'm doing public speaking coaching, and now it's kind of the number one interest I have in my career, even my personal life, is this notion of storytelling. Learning how to storytell in a way to connect with others, I think, is a very, very powerful tool. And so it's been this journey, right? I think when a lot of people think of how do you become a coach, either you know exactly what you want to do and then you just go all into it and you figure it out, or I would say to people who don't know if they want to be a coach, invest in yourself, go through programs, learn from others, see what they're doing, see if that's something you would want to do, if you feel qualified to do it. Do you need certification? I would say more times than not, you don't, but I think it can be helpful to help you meet people in that tribe that you can really learn and grow with and learn from. So that's kind of been my journey to become now this communications coach.
And so, would you say essentially just learning to be a coach is not sufficient? You should have, you should basically have some life lived. Is that fair to say?
Uh, well, I think I worked with a coach, a life coach who was only 24 when I was being coached by him. And, when I closed my first client, my first full paid client, I took that money and invested in coaching. Sounds crazy to do this, right? But they say that in order to be a coach, you should have your own coach. So I was like, I have to have a coach. And this guy was 24, much younger than me, and not nearly the number of life experiences in some levels. But I think life experience isn't just about age, it's about actual experiences. And I think at the end of the day, if you're a great coach, and it depends on the type of coaching, you need to have a certain level of expertise in some regards. But I think being able to hold space with people and asking powerful and deep questions, allowing the coachee, the person who's getting coached, to dig deep, reflect on things that you've never reflected on, think about things you've never thought about, answer tough questions is so vital. So I don't necessarily know that you need to be somebody in his 30s or 40s with lots of lived experience. I think it's just about, do you have an interest in serving others and can you really support them? So I think there are probably a lot of coaches out there who are in their early 20s who can be effective as much as somebody my age now, in my 40s, doing coaching.
Yeah, okay. I guess it comes down to if you have knowledge in a specific area and someone is seeking out that knowledge to take them from A to B, C, D, or whatever, then it doesn't really matter, I guess, how old the coach is once they have the experience and the results to back it up.
I don't even think it's that, Andy. I think it's about
No?
belief itself. So let me give you an
Okay.
example. You can start coaching somebody and not even necessarily know how to help them, and you're literally studying feverishly in between sessions, learning how can I serve this person? What more can I bring to the table? Sometimes somebody brings a problem to you, you don't even know how to solve it. And not that you're necessarily solving problems for people. It does depend on the type of coaching you're giving them. But I think as a coach, you can't go into the coaching thinking I need to have all the answers. I just need to be able to ask great questions. And
Hmm.
in coaching, it's about partnering with somebody. The coachee shouldn't expect the coach to know everything. The coach can serve as an accountability partner, as an inspiration, a motivating factor. And so I think it's about, do you really connect with somebody on a deeper level who truly listens and hears you and is willing to support you in the ways that you need to be supported? I think that's even more important in some ways, because I think a lot of people who are actually getting coached already kind of know what they need to be doing, already have this inkling as to what I should be doing. The question many times is, why aren't you doing it? And I think the good coaches can encourage their coachees to dig into that commitment and that hard work to help them achieve what they're truly after.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. And what I love about your journey and what you've done so far is you've been skill stacking like crazy, right? And sometimes you have this, some well not sometimes, well there's this notion that you need to be zoned in or on a specific audience client, and it's there's it's debatable. But what I just love about where you are is you have so many experiences, so in just being a coach, doing life coaching, but then communications coach, and then within communication you have different areas. So if someone comes to you, how easy is it now for you to just switch hats and realize what that specific person needs?
Well, this is, I think, the importance of a discovery call, right? You want to understand, what is somebody's pain point? What is their obstacle? What is their challenge that they're faced with? And I think the good coach will say, yeah, Andy, I don't coach on that issue, but let me refer you to somebody who does. I think the good coaches know their limitations in some ways. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be willing to take on something that's tough or something that gets you out of your comfort zone or even makes you feel like an imposter. But for me, I had a prospective client come to me and saying he wanted coaching on writing a best man speech. And I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
it's just, I don't know, just because I'm divorced now, I don't know, but I'm just like, yeah, I'm not your guy, right? I'm just not your guy to do that. And so I think it's about knowing your limitations. But within my realm of communications, it is kind of an umbrella. I do feel really good about being able to help them. So even with my clients who are looking to improve their pronunciation, I've been incorporating storytelling with them. Because I'm going to share a story. When I was in business school, I'm a letters and reading kind of guy. I'm not a numbers and logic kind of guy. So I took this business statistics class, and I had this professor who was from Greece, Professor Limberopoulos, and may he rest in peace. He passed away, I think, within the last year or two, from Greece. And on the very first day of class, he kind of got up and spoke about, what the course is going to be around and his style and etc. And I remember being like in my seat, like, whoa, I need to really pay attention to this guy. He's got a pretty noticeable and pronounced accent. But because he was so funny, told these amazing jokes and these stories, he was an official interpreter for the Greek national team in the Olympics during the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, telling us these fascinating stories and applying these lessons and stories to the problems in business statistics. He made business statistics sexy and fun. It was incredible. And so it taught me this lesson that many times people think that they have a problem. Oh, my pronunciation, my accent's holding me back. When in fact, it's actually, you just need to be more confident in communicating your ideas. And through stories, I'm telling you, you can really connect with people. So I've been incorporating that into my pronunciation practice, because a lot of people come to me, I want to be more confident. And I think competence helps you develop confidence. And so, like any skill that you want to develop, it takes time, it takes practice to build that sense of competence that I can do this. And once you know you can do something, you're going to feel confident about it. And so, for me, I just think that I'm just trying to just help my clients in any way that I can, whether that's they're feeling more comfortable in front of an audience, whether that's in front of their team delivering a presentation, a speech, um, however that might be. And so it is great to feel like I can support my clients in a number of ways versus just one super specific niche thing like accent reduction or pronunciation coaching.
Yeah, because I remember you also sharing another story and, working alongside you, where it just really showed me how, I guess, I don't know if this is really like a coaching hat or coaching perspective, but where you sometimes have to be creative and just think in solutions and not problems. Um, so I would love for you to talk about this one client that you helped who she needed to give, I believe it was a workshop, was a,
Mm.
or a speech, a keynote. Okay, you said, so you know which one I'm talking about. So tell 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 about that creative solution and how the client's response was. Yeah.
I had a client come to me saying, Rico, I'm going to be presenting at a conference in Birmingham. And she's from Asia, so English is not her first language. And I said, okay, well, tell me more about it. She's like, well, I'm going to send you a document that kind of lets you know more about what I need to do. She is a professional facilitator. So she facilitates different, projects at different organizations. And so this was a certified professional facilitator conference. And she had to present a keynote of about 20 minutes and then conduct a 30-minute activity. And she didn't really know what she wanted to do or how she was going to go about it, but she had this 9-page document. And I read through this document. I reached out to her and I said, are you trying to memorize this? Like, is this something you're going to memorize? Or like, what's your plan? She's like, memorize? I can't memorize this. I said, well, it's an amazing story. You don't need to memorize. You just need to tell your story. And it just had this incredible story about how as a child, she was this artist who, due to family circumstances, her father went bankrupt, his business folded, and they were very, broke and didn't have the opportunity to invest more in her arts. But he somehow, by hook or by crook, found the way for her to be able to continue as an artist. But in this presentation, she wanted to show people how to flip failure into a learning experience. So basically, failure serving as a vehicle for success, if you will. And the activity that she was going to do, because she was going to do a keynote about these failures in her life, these ways that she failed in her life. And then the activity was to present a fake scenario, like a fake failure, and have the participants study the failure and use the principles taught to them in the speech to flip this failure into a success. And she's like, yeah, I don't know if I really like this failure, and I agreed. I said, look, I don't think you should do a fake failure. And I just had this moment come to me. And I told my clients, I said, look, why don't you use your failures in your life? Because she was trying to have like 5 or 6 stories in this keynote. I was like, that's just way too many stories. It's gonna muddle your message. I said, why don't you do this? Why don't you take these failures and give assign a failure to each group? She had like 5 or 6 groups of people. And I said, why don't you assign these groups a failure from your life? Don't tell them it's a failure from your life, but have them apply this flipping failure. And I said, why don't you call it the flipping failure formula? It's got that alliteration. It just rolls off the tongue. FFF, flipping failure formula. Have them apply this flipping failure formula to these failures. And at the end, you can let them know once they share their approach on how this failure can be turned into a success. You can share in closing that these are failures from your life. And she's like, oh my gosh, Rico, this is an amazing thing. And so again, I can't take credit because these are failures from her life. The fact that she was even able and willing to get vulnerable with me to share these, I think speaks to the kind of relationships I build with my clients. And I was able to help her craft her keynote in a way that she was telling stories. She didn't have to memorize. I'm sure she knew the stories by heart. All she had to think about was what stories do I want to share. She ended up sharing like 2 stories. And then she shared this activity. And then the culmination was letting the audience know that these are failures from her life. And I think, again, when you share these stories with people, you connect deeply. By becoming a master storyteller, you can connect with any audience. And I'm actually happy to report she reached out to me. She wants some more coaching now. So
Oh wow.
really excited to be working with her again and can't wait to get started and see what her next project is going to be.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It just goes to show that, once you come from a good place and you just really want to work in service of your client, and then couple that with some creativity, good problem solving skills, man, like you can make magic happen. So I'm really happy to hear on the, that she's willing to do coaching again. And we're coming close to the end of the conversation, Rico, because I don't want it to run too long. But for aspiring coaches, because let's be honest, we want to keep it real here as well, is it hasn't always been so easy, right? You haven't always found it so easy. And one of the areas, in our conversations that you found that you had to work on was knowing your value. You care to speak on that a bit?
Hmm. That is at the heart and soul and the crux of being able to make it as a coach. You have to believe in your heart of hearts that what you do and what you offer can make an impact. And coaching is a privilege. And you really have to understand that if you're going to be a coach, you cannot give away your services for free or for a song. You need to charge and charge handsomely. And I think as coaches, especially new coaches, we tend to forget just how big the world truly is. Over 8 billion people. Not that I'm going to serve every one of them, of course, but even if every person on earth wanted to be coached by me and I charged $1 million, I couldn't service all of them. So you need to remember, this is a message to any young or aspiring coach. You need to remember that there are people who will pay you. Your vibe is going to attract your tribe. You need to believe that you can have clients pay what you're worth. And I think it's really important to understand that you need to know what your number is that's going to allow you to live. Because you can't coach 40 hours a week or 35 hours in Europe a week. You maybe you're coaching 2 to 4 hours a day. I mean, 1 hour of coaching is equivalent of 2 hours of other work, in my opinion, at least. And so I once heard from a coach, she said, you need to charge as much as you can by saying the number out loud and keep on saying the number higher and higher until you laugh. If it makes you laugh, that's too much. But say the number, the highest number that you can without laughing, that should be your rate. And I'm telling you, when you charge a higher rate, the quality of clients that you're going to get increases dramatically. You charge somebody $25 an hour, they're going to be a nonstop headache, canceling on you, no showing you, giving you these sad stories about why they're not committed. You charge somebody much more, 10 times that an hour. It's amazing how all those problems go away. The only question is, how do I pay? When do we get started? And that's it. People suddenly they're not canceling, they're not no showing, and they're doing the work.
And let's just to keep it straight up, it hasn't been so easy for you. So how was how was it for you the first time, going from charging, let's say pennies, to asking your first potential client to pay this handsome amount? Like how was that for you?
It was a very terrifying experience and very much bumbling things, right? I feel like anything you do the first time, it's not going to be easy, right? If you go to a dance class, have you ever been to a dance class and you're trying to learn how to do a little routine from the teacher and it's like pop, 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 and then it's your turn to go and you're like stumbling over yourself? That's what it's like when you're coaching. There are going to be some hiccups, there are going to be some missteps, but you can't let that hold you back. You have to look at every discovery call, every interaction with people as just another step of your step ladder to success. but it was I fumbled. I dropped the ball. You know, my first client, I didn't even ask for money in the discovery. I didn't even ask if she wanted to be coached by me. Like I didn't even make the offer to her what it was going to cost. I didn't know. I was embarrassed
Yeah.
to think about it now, but you know, you learn, and I think for some reason we as adults we're afraid to fail. We're afraid to fail. Kids fail all the time. They fall down, they get up, they cry, they get back on their bike. Yeah, as adults, whether we're learning a foreign language, whether we're doing a lot of things, we're just so embarrassed when we fail. We're worried about the judgment from others. And failure is such a powerful thing. We need to fail fast and um, quickly. You know, just I mean, not fast and quickly, consistently. We want to fail because through failure, as long as you're not repeating the same mistakes, you're growing. You're growing from those failures. So you want to actually fail. There's so much more to be learned in some ways from failure than there is success. Success might just be a fluke. You might have just got lucky one day, and then you think that you know it
True.
all, and then you suffer because you don't know why you can't figure it out. But through failure, I think failure, just like great stories aren't built on successes; they're built on failures. And I think the lessons in life are learned from failures more than they are from successes.
Yeah, there's a big lesson there. And I know in, us working alongside each other in some ways, working with each other, um, I know one of the biggest realizations that had to be made was that even though it's about you, it's still the value that you're or what you want to ask for a client. It doesn't, it's not up to you. It's up to you to find out what it's worth and what the value is for that client. Um, and so maybe if you can just touch base on that a bit, then we can just move to the ending of this conversation.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily post my rates on a website because I think by doing so, you're sort of like limiting yourself and your potential. And I think when you start to think about what is the person's need, and if you can be the solution to that person's need, if there's pain and urgency, people will pay to have that pain taken away and quickly. And that's not to say you should be price gouging. I don't think it's about trying to take advantage of people. It's really about serving people. But people inherently value things that are more expensive than their things that are inexpensive. And by truly uncovering what the pain point is and understanding the problem, and if you truly believe in your heart that you can help this person, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for it. I've learned from one of my coaches, you need to go in with a buyer's mentality. You're there to serve, you're not there to beg. They're coming to you because they have a problem they want support with. And as a result, you can pick and choose. And I would say that you definitely are going to find yourself happier, more contented, more willing to do extra work when you're getting paid your value. When you're not, you're going into it with a certain resentment or a certain just unwillingness to go above and beyond. And that's not a good situation to be in either. So I would just encourage any coach, if you're listening to this, don't be afraid to charge more than you are right now because somebody will pay it. And if you're doing a good job, you're going to get even more clients.
Yeah, it's nice that you say. I mean, and the funny thing is that resentment that you feel at the end of the day, you're the one to blame. It's
You're
not even, yeah, it's not even the client, but it's again, it comes back to that self belief. Just being confident and feeling competent in your abilities to help other people, but also just coming from a serving mentality. At the end of the day, it's up to you. You just got to make the decision and just know to get a let's say, let's just throw some numbers. To get a $25 per hour client will cost just as much energy to get a $500 per hour client, right? So
And I would argue
um,
it's actually more energy because of that resentment and that sort of negativity, that feeling like, I've got to get motivated for this session versus somebody's paying you $500 an hour. There's not a lack of motivation there. You're like, when do I
yeah.
get started? So
Yeah.
And I think again, it's like, you have to look at what is your capacity? What is your upper limit of how many people you can truly serve? And you need to be real with yourself. Do you really want to be coaching 30, 35 people a month? I don't know that you do,
Yeah.
and I think it's really, really important to be honest with yourself. By charging more, you're going to be uncomfortable. But again, that's how
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. You got to work through that discomfort. Rico, we can sit here and chop it up for another hour. Like we just surpassed an hour. And so I wanna start closing off this conversation because you know me, man. I respect the relationship that we have, and just being able to grow alongside you and just seeing you on your journey and just growing. It's been like the most amazing thing. But we're gonna go into some quick hit questions. That's how I like to end these conversations. And so basically, I'm just gonna I have a few questions for you that I'm gonna throw, and you answer them as quickly as possible, 1 to 2 sentences. Yeah, let me know if you are ready.
Let's get it.
All right. So, what's one book you believe everyone should read to better themselves?
Wow, that's a tough, tough question. One book. There's so many. This may sound somewhat trite, perhaps, but I think The Alchemist is a book
Mm,
that still really resonates with me. And some people may look at it as like a fairy tale, but The Alchemist for sure.
okay, okay. If you could instantly master any skill, what skill would that be? So many to choose from, right?
Maybe stand-up comedy.
Ooh, okay. That's
Just
an
another.
interesting answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice, nice. What's the most unexpected lesson this journey has taught you?
That I've always had everything I needed.
Hmm, good one. If you could send a message to yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
Get coaching.
Sweet. What's one hobby you've always wanted to pick up but haven't yet?
Hmm. Surfing.
Hmm. Okay. If you had to pick one creator that has had the biggest impact on you, who would that be?
Hmm. I think my coach Yasser Khan.
Oh, yeah? Oh, nice. And the last one, looking ahead 50 years, what do you hope people say about you and your body of work that you're putting out?
That my coaching made an impact and changed lives.
Hmm. I'm sure that's gonna be done. Rico, we're at the end, and I really appreciate you, bro, for taking this journey with me and for just agreeing to do this podcast episode with me. It's been a long time coming, and it's finally here. And just to even think that we're at the end of it, it's still blowing my mind. Any closing remarks that you want to say before we close things off?
I think the one line that I would tell anybody, and this just really resonates with me, is that it's never too late to change your life. Never too late. I don't care how old you are, what station in life you're in, it's never too late. It just takes starting with taking massive, imperfect action. Start now. Yesterday was the best day to start. Today is the second best day. So get started now.
Sweet, sweet, nice. That's a amazing way to end. Now, to you, the listener, if you want to get in touch with my buddy Rico, you can find him on Instagram and Threads at Rico Lazo, or you can also find him on LinkedIn. Just look for Rico Lazo. And I will also be leaving his contact information in the show notes. I want to thank you again for tuning in on this episode, and I hope to see you on the next one. Peace.